Good evening, everyone. I know many of you sitting here not very comfortable, but searching for the purpose in life is not easy anyway. So that's the topic of our discussion tonight, searching for life purpose or the purpose of life. And as you know, this is something that humanity from the dawn of consciousness has been looking for. Why we are here, what is the purpose of our life, what is the reason for the extremely difficult dynamics of this life, why there is so much suffering, so much pain, so much difficulty. This is a question that comes up constantly. And when we are young, we have all kinds of questions and hopes and aspirations. And as we get older, we begin to become even more puzzled. And the questions add up. So, we are not going tonight be able to answer this fundamental question, but hopefully we begin a process of search together and see whether we can find some ways of looking at this issue. And as you know, I will be speaking from both a Baha'i perspective and the current scientific thought on this issue. And together we will discuss to see whether which one of them we feel more comfortable with and more easy to understand. To do that, first of all, I want to read two quotations. Two statements about the purpose of life. The first one I read for you is from one of the most distinguished scientists of our time. He is a biologist, evolutionary biologist, Richard Dawkins, who has written a number of books, including The God's Delusion and other books. And as you know, the theory of evolution, which was put forward by Darwin, in recent years has been chosen and picked up by scientists in humanities and in biological sciences as the area that they could find answer to the questions of the purpose of life. And here he talks about his understanding of the purpose of life. He says, the universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect of. The universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is at bottom no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. This is the universe we observe. At the bottom of it, there is no design, no purpose, no evil, no good, nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA, human DNA, neither cares nor knows. Because in evolutionary theory, the determining factor for the purpose of life and the nature of life is DNA. Okay? They believe that everything in human life determines by DNA. So he says DNA neither cares nor knows. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. Okay? So that is his understanding, and many contemporary materialist scientists' understanding of the purpose of life. There is no purpose. It is all by accident. There is no design. There is no order. It is just as happened. And it all is determined by DNA, which neither cares nor knows. So that's one view, and it is one of the most common views about the purpose of life in modern Western scientific thought. Okay. The other one is a quotation from Baha'u'llah, the founder of the Baha'i faith. He says, having created the world and all that liveth and moveth therein, he's talking about God. Having created the world and all that liveth and moveth therein, he chose to confer upon man, humanity, the unique distinction and capacity to know and to love. And the ultimate knowledge is to know God, meaning the source of all good and source of all knowledge, and to love God, the source of all good and knowledge. Okay? And love. So, from the Baha'i perspective, from Baha'u'llah's perspective, is that we have been created to know and to love. And then later on in other writings of the Baha'i faith, we see similar statements. And I just read this one statement for you. Is that here another statement says, little reflection, little admonition is necessary for us to realize the purpose of all creation. You have to think about it. What is the purpose of all creation? So when we think about issue of purpose of life, first of all, we have to ask, what is life? And when we reflect on life, we can think of at least 3 levels of life. First is life as a biological process, as a physical biological process. We are all alive, we are breathing, we are feeling, we have sensations, we get hungry, and all the things that creates, biological aspect of human life. The fundamental purpose of the biological life, we have to see what it is, and I will come upon it in this short. The second way of looking at life is that life is a biological and a psychological social process. In other words, life is not only biological, but also has dimensions of thoughts, of feelings, of relationships, of interactions, of communication. And that's the second way of looking at life. And the third one is that life is a biological, psychosocial, and a spiritual phenomenon. Now, we want to talk about all these three. I remember many years ago, I was in Leningrad. Then it was Leningrad. Now it's St. Petersburg. And I was invited to go to visit colleagues at the psychiatric hospital. Myself, being a psychiatrist, was invited to go and visit some Russian colleagues. And at that time I was living in Switzerland. And Switzerland that year, I think, had been chosen as the best country in the world to live. So it was, a distinction. And I went there and we were sitting and talking. And the life in Switzerland, in Russia was awful situation. There were people in lines for bread and for vodka and for cigarettes and for fatty food every day. And it was just a miserable life situation. And my colleague turned to me and said, "What are fundamental human needs? What are main human needs?" And I haven't been thinking about what are main human needs, And when people ask you a question, you have to answer. So I began to reflect on it, and I gave the following answer. I said, well, it seems that we have three categories of needs. First, what we call survival needs. We need food, we need water, we need shelter, we need a place of security, the basic things of life that helps us to survive, to be alive. And my colleagues observed that throughout history of humanity, we haven't been able to meet the survival needs of majority of people of the world. When we watch television, I can't watch television, the news. During the last few days, you hear about Somalia and about hunger and about millions of people dying. And you're seeing these little children and adults emaciated, hungry, thirsty. It's amazing. We live in 21st century, and you will see that. And a few months ago, we saw what happened in Japan, and then in Haiti, and before that in, all over the world. It's happening constantly. So humanity hasn't been able to meet its survival needs. And when you listen to governments and leaders of governments, they will see that constantly they talk about survival issues. They talk about the economy, right? To give you food and give you shelter and give you housing and give you clothes and this and that. This is all they talk about. That's the fundamental preoccupation of the leaders of the world. Isn't that amazing? You know, the world never has been as rich as it is now, and never has been as poor as it is now. It is one of the really mysteries of life. So one category of human needs, we call it survival needs. And the survival needs directly is related to the issue of looking at human beings as biological beings. Survival needs are related to human beings as only biological. Okay. The second category of needs that we have, I call them association needs. Human needs to communicate with other human beings. Which means human need to love, right? We human beings by nature are lovers, and we want to communicate, we want to relate, we want to connect, and we want to connect with other people in the ways that are fair, that are just, that are free. You know, the whole issues of freedom, justice, equality. These are all issues of human relationships, human association, you know. For example, throughout history, men and women basically, have been fighting to have equal rights. Minorities have been fighting to have equal rights. Oppressed people have been fighting to have freedom. People who have been subject to prejudice and segregation, they have been seeking justice. These are the fundamental human association needs. This is when we look at life, not only biological condition, but also a social, psychological and social condition. Okay? This is the second category of human needs and human life. And when you study the writings of the Baha'i faith, you come across very interesting statements about life. And those statements are fundamentally about two things. One, about life here as we experience it, which it has a very interesting characteristic. It comes to an end. This life comes to an end. Doesn't matter how long we live, it wouldn't be very long. Okay? And it comes to an end. So, this life, which is basically a biological and psychological and social type of life, doesn't matter how much we struggle in it and how much take care of ourselves and how much we, eat good food and, exercise and take yoga and do all of those things. Nevertheless, we die. Okay. And in the Baha'i writings, you will see that they refer that whether we want to have eternal life or not. There is a concept of temporary life and eternal life. Temporary life basically deals with the issues of survival and relationships. Those are the two issues. But the problem with the survival and relationships is that it never completes human life. When I told you I was talking with my colleagues at Karl Marx Institute of Psychiatry. So I said, there are three categories of human needs. The first category are survival needs, and the second category are relationship needs. And I described them as I described to you. And they say, what is left? Because if you have good life, if you have economic life, and you have good house and good family and good society and freedom and all of those, then what else you want, you know? And I said, you know, I'm coming from Switzerland, and Switzerland just has been chosen as the best place in the world to live. And surprise, surprise, there are a lot of unhappy Swiss. They're really unhappy. You know, I used to go for my haircut to a gentleman, and he was a German Swiss. And he was a good, you know, he cut hair very nicely, and it was expensive, but it was nice. And as he would cut, he would take a long time cutting. As he would cut, I would engage him in discussion. And he would begin to talk and begin to express how much he hates the Italian and French Swiss people. Okay, and he would get more and more excited, and this sharp razor, yeah, you know, I said, oh my God, you know, and then not only the Swiss, the Italian Swiss and the French Swiss, then he would say, and the foreigners. Oh my God, you know. He said, you know, we are a country of 5 million, there are 2 million foreigners here, you know. I said, oh my God, I'm one of the foreigners here, and he has this sharp, you know. So I had to, you know, use all my psychiatric knowledge to somebody, calm him down, you know. I say, Herman, calm down. But Herman was so upset. I say, Herman, you live in the best country in the world. He said, oh, it's the best country. You know how many people commit suicide? You know this, you know that, and you know how many wives are unhappy? You know how many kids are unhappy? And that was true, you see. Because for us human beings, it's not enough to have wealth and security and freedom. These are important, but they are not enough. They are not enough because of several reasons. First, and this is a very unconscious phenomenon, but always comes to consciousness and goes back to unconscious, is that we as human beings know that we will eventually die. And because we know we will eventually die, we are in a difficult situation, because while we know we will die, we cannot think of our non-existence. We cannot think of us being nothing. You know, that's the reason that you say, when I die, what do you mean when I die? Okay? As though something is left behind. Of course there is something left behind, you see. The very psychology of human nature is that we cannot think of our own non-existence. We exist. The nature of our existence changes, but our existence doesn't become non-existence. And here is the phenomenon of human soul and human reality, human consciousness and soul and spirit. These are all different names of the same reality of human being. Comes to the point is that, as a very famous psychiatrist said, we are the carriers of spirit. We are the carriers. We are the instruments of spirit, of our consciousness, of what we call me or I. When you say, I am this and that and that and that and that, you are not talking only about the way you look and the way your body is. Because how many of you right now can imagine your face exactly as it is? It's very difficult to think how your face is, right? You have to look at the mirror. If you don't have a mirror, it's very difficult to say, how do I look? You see? Why? Because it's not important, because it's not us, because the look changes. From a childhood to the old age that we go, this look changes. All the cells that are there come and go. What remains is that self that is within this look. Okay? So the human reality, human consciousness, human awareness, that capacity of saying I, and capacity of saying I know, and the capacity of saying I love, and the capacity of saying I decide, this I, this self, this reality remains. And this reality has, as I mentioned right now, three fundamental powers. Power to know, power to love, and power to decide. So all of us have these powers. Power to know. And of all things that we have to know, which is the most important thing, is to know ourselves. Self-knowledge. Okay. And the capacity to love. And of all of the things that we have to love, the first and the foremost, the most important, is to love the reality of ourselves. Okay? Because when you begin to love the reality of yourself, something dramatic happens and you become universal. And your love goes from yourself to the whole world, to the whole universe, to the whole creation. And the capacity to decide what you do with your knowledge and with your love. How you're going to use your knowledge and how you're going to use your love. This is the challenge of life. The challenge of life for humanity has always been how do we use our knowledge, the things we know, and how do we use our capacity to love. So let's see what has happened in human history so far. In human history so far, what has happened is that we have used our knowledge both for positive things and for negative things. You know, sciences. Look what we have done with sciences. Okay? In sciences, we use our sciences for positive as well as negative. And unfortunately, negative use of science is far more common than the positive use of science. The same thing is about love. Humanity's capacity, our capacity for love, until now has been limited. Limited love is dangerous. Limited love causes violence. Okay? How many times you read people say, that a person, a general, says, they asked him, it happened a few weeks ago in The Hague, in the International Criminal Court. They asked the Bosnian general, why you committed the atrocities that you committed and killing thousands and thousands of people, innocent boys and men in Bosnia-Herzegovina. And he said, I did it for love of my people. How many times you hear people say that we are doing things for love of our family, love our people, love of our race, love of our religion. You see, limited love is dangerous. And when limited love is mixed with the power of knowledge and technology, creates instruments of war and instruments of destruction. So what has happened in human history is that as human beings have been trying to evolve and develop and grow and mature, and we have been collectively going through our stages of childhood and adolescence, and we are now in our collective adolescent age, we have used our knowledge and love in the limited, misguided ways. And the outcome of that misguided way of using our capacities of knowledge and love is that we have made life miserable for ourselves and for everybody else. This is the fundamental problem that has happened with humanity. Therefore, it's not surprising that when we study the mission of the Baha'i faith and the message of the Baha'i faith and the teachings of the Baha'i faith, we come across few statements that are very fundamental. One is that humanity now is at the threshold of its collective maturity, adulthood. We are collectively, gradually leaving behind our childhood and adolescence. We are still very much children and adolescents. But nevertheless, we are beginning to put one foot in the collective adulthood of humanity. And the fundamental difference between childhood and adolescence on the one hand, and adulthood on the other hand, is the capacity to create unity and peace. That's the fundamental difference. The fundamental difference of a mature humanity. Can they open it or not?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's one we can.
Yeah. And open that door also, please.
Oh, the door, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very hot here, so.
The biological body might just kick off.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. No, it doesn't open. Thank you. So the fundamental issue here is that suddenly we begin to have a new understanding of the purpose of life. New understanding of the purpose of life is for us to move from fundamental preoccupation with the biological and psychosocial aspects of our being to becoming spiritual beings. Okay? How do you become a spiritual being? How this transformation takes place? At the core of this transformation is for us to become peaceful and peace-creating people. What do I mean by peaceful? You see, most of the times we are not peaceful. We don't have inner peace. In order to create inner peace, our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions have to be in harmony with each other. What we think, what we feel, and what we do have to be in harmony with each other. And they have to be in harmony with our ethical, moral principles. And they have to be universal in nature. That's the only time that we feel peaceful, inner peace. In inner peace requires that fundamental inner unity between our powers of soul, to know, to love, to will. And these powers have to become universal, because limited knowledge and limited love is dangerous. They create separation, us and them. So that's one fundamental issue, is to become peaceful individuals. Another dimension in order to become a spiritual person, to have a purpose in life and become a spiritual person, is that our staying alive and our capacity to love and capacity to relate should result in creation of conditions of unity and peace with other people. The greatest burden of humanity is the burden of strife and war and conflict. All the poverty of humanity, the diseases that we see that are treatable but they are not treated, all the poverty that we see in the world, they are all because of disunity among the peoples of the world, because of prejudice, because of the fundamental separation that we have created with each other. So when we reflect upon what is the fundamental purpose of life, the fundamental purpose of life is not only to stay alive, and is not only to create a small community of people and love that small community of people, but is to become universal. To become universal in our thinking, in our feeling, in our thoughts, in our actions. And the only way we become universal is when we become peaceful and peace-creating people. You know, let me read something here for you. It's very interesting. Because from a Baha'i perspective, relationship between God and humanity is continuous. Never for a moment the relationship between God and humanity is interrupted. If it is interrupted for a moment, we become nothing. Okay? It's always there. And this relationship is for the purpose of guidance of humanity. And this guidance comes through the messengers of God. Okay? And for each age, there is a new manifestation, a new messenger. And for this age, that manifestation of God is Baha'u'llah. And Baha'u'llah says It's very interesting. Let me see whether I can find that statement. Abdul Baha says, Abdul Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, the central figure of the Baha'i faith after Baha'u'llah. He says, Baha'u'llah, he was in Paris, and he was giving a talk. And he was talking about Baha'u'llah. He said, Baha'u'llah spent his life teaching his lesson of, what do you think? Of love and unity. Baha'u'llah himself, I think in one of my sessions that we were here, I read it. Baha'u'llah himself said to Edward Brown, as you know, Edward Brown was the only Westerner that met Baha'u'llah, okay, in prison city of Akka. He was a professor at Cambridge, and he went to visit Baha'u'llah, and he spoke Persian very well, and Baha'u'llah spoke to him. And here is what Brown says, what Baha'u'llah told him. Baha'u'llah says, he says, thou hast come to see a prisoner and an exile. We desire but the good of the world and the happiness of the nations. That all nations should become one in faith, and all men as brothers. That the bonds of affection and unity between the sons and men should be strengthened, that diversity of religion should cease and differences of race be annulled. What harm is in this? Okay? Now, Tolstoy said, the key to the salvation of humanity and to peace is in the hand of the prisoner of Akka, which is Baha'u'llah. Okay. So this is a very interesting phenomenon. The interesting phenomenon is that the fundamental purpose of life for us to be able to become peacemakers. This is very difficult because we constantly find ourselves in conflict with other people, as husbands and wives, as parents and children, as teachers and students, as employers and employees, as friends. We constantly find ourselves having conflict. We have conflict inside ourselves and conflict between ourselves and other people. And we get angry very easily. And we blame others very fast. And we put our shortcomings in the context of other people's faults. We do these things. These are natural human responses. But these things that we do take place at the level of living as a biological being and as a psychological and social being. But when we want to move and transform to the next level of a spiritual being, the challenge becomes how to deal with these inner conflicts and interpersonal conflicts. How to become unifiers. How to become agents of unity. This is the challenge of mature humanity. The challenge of mature humanity is to develop that kind of love that is all-inclusive and unconditional. And that is a very difficult thing to do. Because the first step for that kind of love is to be able to love ourselves enough, not needing to compete with other people. Because as long as we compete and compare, we are going to have difficulties of, So there are so many issues about that. And one of the things that helps to resolve these, interesting enough, are the problems in life. People say, why God has created so many problems? Diseases and earthquakes and, hot weather in Toronto today. And, why God does, these things, Well, these things are really good for us if we understand them of why they do that. First of all, they become a reminder that physically we are very weak. We don't have much power. Physically, we cannot do much, you see. Physically, we get sick, we have pain, we get old, we die. Physically, it's all bummers, okay? Physically, it's not all that good, okay? Thank God we have doctors, right? Thank God, yes. Emergency doctors especially, because you need them in emergency, okay? Thank God. But nevertheless, physically, this life is not a very easy life. Okay? And emotionally, human relationships are very difficult because people expect a lot from each other. And usually in love relationship, people feel disappointed. That's the reason that always falling in love is much easier and nicer than being in love. Okay? Falling in love is nice. Because falling in love is all in your control. You imagine it. Okay? It is your imagination, It reminds me of a story of this young lady had a dream. And in the dream, she dreamt that this handsome prince came and took her in his arms and went on a horse, went to a castle. And she was all excited, And they went to this bedroom, and this was this huge bed, well-bed, fantastic bed. Put her down, and she was all excited, said, "What are you going to do next?" And the prince said, "This is your dream. How do I know?" Okay? This is your dream, okay? So, here we are. The falling in love is nice. Being in love is very difficult. It's very difficult. Because love requires a fundamental level of selflessness. And selflessness requires a fundamental level of self-development. You cannot become selfless if you don't have a self. Okay? If I say, well, I give everything to you and I have nothing, what kind of a big deal is that? Okay? Yeah, I give you everything I have, okay? And I have no pennies, okay? When we want to become selfless, first we have to develop ourselves. We have to become whole. We have to become complete. This movement towards wholeness, fullness, completeness is the fundamental quest of humanity. You know, in the literature of Islam, there is a quest for becoming full human, insan kamil. Insan kamil means becoming a complete whole human. Okay? And Iqbal of Lahore, which is one of the famous poets of Pakistan, whose poetry is in Persian language, he has a huge book of poetry which describes his journey to the next world. He goes to the next world in search of finding examples of whole humans, complete, wholesome humans. And he finds 4, 3 men and 1 woman. And the 1 woman is the heroine of the Baha'i faith, Tahirah. Okay, Tahirah is the one who, at the beginning of the Baha'i era, in 1854 or something like that. I try to remember the date. In that era, you know, it was the beginning of the women's movement, okay, emancipation of women in the West. I don't recall the exact date when the gathering in northern New York took place. Any of the feminists in this room remember when was? Huh?
I think you said 1862 last time you were here.
1862 was it?
I think that's what you said.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I don't recall, it was 1860, no, it was during the time of the bomb, okay? 1848. Anyway, at that time, in North America, there was a movement for emancipation of women. And in Iran, she was the one that, in a dramatic way, started the era of emancipation of women in an Islamic world. And she was described as a full human in this poetry of Iqbal. Now, every one of us has to become full human, complete human. We have to become more and more complete. And as we become more complete, then we become capable, more and more capable of selflessness. The more you evolve yourself, the more you can give of yourself. Okay? Think of life, your life, as a tree. When a tree is the most evolved, when it has delicious fruits, right? That's the ultimate evolution of a tree, when it has fruits. But the fruits are not for the tree. Fruits are for others, to give it to others, to give life to others, to make the continuation of life of the tree possible, right? So the ultimate level of wholeness of the tree is when the tree becomes selfless. When the tree has its finest fruit and it gives its fruits. This should be the life of every human being. The life of every human being has to be like a tree. We have to evolve, we have to develop, so that in due course of time, we develop fruits, delicious fruits, life-giving fruits, and then we give it. And that becomes the act of sacrifice. Selflessness. Sacrifice, meaning making something sacred. So if you want to make your life sacred, life has to become fruitful. And the fruit of that has to be then something that you can give to others. And what is the most precious thing that you can give to others? Is peace. Right? There is nothing as precious to give to others as peace. And that's the reason that the fundamental purpose of life is the process in which we become the agents of unity, harmony, and peace. And the force of unity is love. The force of unity is love. In other words, it's impossible to become a peaceful person without becoming a loving person. Okay, it is love that gives. And love, of course, has to be conscious love, not a blind love. And their conscious love requires understanding, requires wisdom, requires learning, requires expansion of our consciousness. You know, Abdul Baha says, life is a load which must be carried on while we are on earth. You know, life is difficult, is a load that must be carried on while we are on earth. But the cares of the lower things of life, you know, eating, cleaning, house, you know, so many, you know, I have a neighbor that spends hours and hours every day shining his car. Shining his car. And then the birds come and comment on the shine. So, very shiny. Yeah. You know, it's an amazing phenomenon. You know, you see hours spent and money, and he has all kind of new things put on the car and so forth. And, you know, he's sitting there, and then the birds come. Okay. Anyway, you know. So life is a load which must be carried on while we are on earth. But the cares of the lower things of life should not be allowed to monopolize all the thoughts and aspirations of a human being. The heart's ambitions should ascend to a more glorious goal. Okay? This is very important. The hearts, in other words, your goals have to be much more glorious. Mental activity should rise to higher levels. Men should hold in their souls the vision of celestial perfection, and there prepare a dwelling place for the inexhaustible bounty of the Divine Spirit. So our feelings, hearts, our mind, our thoughts, our spirit, all have to expand, you know. One of the most famous characters in the world of philosophy in Islamic world is Avicenna. Avicenna was foremost philosopher of his time and all times. And one day he turns to his son and said, "What do you like to be when you grow up?" And the son said, "I want to be like you." And Avicenna began to cry. And he sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And the son was surprised. He said, why, your father, you're crying? I want to be like you. You're so profound. You're so famous. You're so this and that and that. He said, yeah, you see, I wanted to be like Prophet Muhammad and ended up here. If you want to be me, you will end up down there. Okay? So it is fundamental that our vision has to be world embracing, has to be all encompassing, has to go beyond the limited ways that we have right now. And most people, the horizon of their vision is so low. They don't see much beyond the immediate. But in order to become peaceful person, you have to become universal. Our visions have to become universal. Our thoughts have to become universal. All have to become universal. Our activities have to become universal. Our domain of work has to become universal. For the young people, we have to remember, young people should remember that they belong to the world and the world belongs to them. You belong to the world and the world belongs to you. And therefore it is essential that you don't put your vision low. Your vision has to be very high, but then you have to go towards it in a practical, systematic, scientifically based manner. There is a lot much more to talk about it, but I think I have to stop. I have a big chapter about that in one of my books, Unity of Faith and Reason, which I read a little bit. So you can go on that, because in that one I talk about the whole dynamics of transformation, how we transform, and the role of difficulties in life, how difficulties make us to transform, the role of prayer in the awareness of death and how important it is for life, and a number of other issues that I deal with in the chapter that I don't think we can continue here. We can open it now, a little bit of discussion, and then we go from there, because I know it's very difficult for all of you sitting here. I'm so sorry. But please, any comments, any questions? Yes.
Just one comment. The year was 1848.
Thank you. Thank
It
you.
was Seneca Falls.
That's right, Seneca Falls, New York. Thank you very much. 1848. All right. Thank you. Yes, please.
What is? Well, how do you reach out to another person? Like, you see somebody who maybe needs your comfort, needs something that you have to offer. How can you? What is a good way to reach out to that person, seeming to be directing them, or being knowing more than they do, or being superior in any way, in a loving way? Like, how do you sort of share with that person?
Could you repeat that question? The question, as I understand, is how do you reach the other person, regardless of the status and all of the outward situation? You want to be close to the other person, right?
Yeah.
They may be in need, may not be in need. Doesn't matter. I think in reaching other people, there are at least two issues involved. One is that we have to be sincere and pure in our intention. We shouldn't have a hidden agenda. Okay, that's that we want to express love to the other without any hidden agenda. That's number one. Because many times people really approach others because they hope to get something, Second, you have to be always prepared for rejection. because people misunderstand. It is so easy to be misunderstood because we live in a world which the fundamental trust between people is not very strong. You know, the world of humanity is wounded world of humanity. There are a lot of wounds, a lot of negative experiences. And therefore people are very hesitant and very uncomfortable with the expressions of love and care on the part of others. And therefore it is not, we shouldn't be surprised when we try to approach the other that we are misunderstood and we are rejected, and sometimes even we become object of their anger. Okay? And because of that, always in human relationship, a certain degree of wisdom is necessary. Okay? A certain degree of thoughtfulness, of, sometimes the greater expression of love to another person is not to do anything. If they are not ready, if they are not in a position to receive, or if they are in an agitated state that may, So we have to judge it very carefully. It's not, not, love is not always easily received. Okay? Yeah, it's not. Because of a variety of reasons. So there is a purity of intention that is necessary, and a good judgment and wisdom whether the timing is right. Okay? And also whether the person is in a state of receptivity or not. So as you see, it's much more complex than, we want it to be easy. Love should be easy, but love is very difficult. One of the most complex phenomena of life is love. And that's why there is so much misunderstanding about love. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yes, very helpful.
Thank you. So much. Yes. Yes, please.
You quoted Richard Dawkins to start with as an example of a sort of extreme reductionist. So do you think that sort of thinking really just affects intellectuals in universities, or do you think it affects the whole society nowadays?
Well, whole societies are very affected by the intellectuals in the society, in the universities, because these ideas permeate our society. They are not only at the universities, they are in the books, they are in the bookstores, they are on radio, they are on televisions, they are in discussions, they are on the internet. And these days, these kind of things spread. And as they spread, they become more and more washed down and become superficial, and a lot of misunderstandings applied to them. And this is, but in recent years, there has been a very determined, systematic effort on the part of Richard Dawkins and others to attack religion and the concept of God, and do it in the language, popular language, that reaches many people. And it has had a considerable impact. There has been a number of evidences that these are going to many levels of society and not only at universities.